Welcome to the National Association of Nonpartisan Reformers 2021 Annual Summit. My name is Andy Moore and I'm the Executive Director of NANR, coming to you from the Big Friendly, Oklahoma City. On behalf of our board and everyone at our organization, let me just say, it's so good to see you. Our theme for the summit this year is Wrap Up and Gear Up. As the calendar draws to a close, we want to reflect on the events of the past year and to also look ahead to what is expected to be a very eventful year for the pro-democracy movement in 2022. So for the next hour and a half, we're going to hear from some of our many members about what they have accomplished in 2021, what challenges they faced and what successes they achieved, and what they look forward to most in the year ahead. Shortly after this live stream, we'll be hosting a networking meeting and a happy hour on Zoom. That event is free for NANR members and it's just $10 for non-members. Everyone's welcome and I hope we'll see you there. The past year has been incredibly difficult for the American democracy. The enduring threat of COVID-19 still lingers, coloring everything we do with a hue of uncertainty, of frustration, of complication, and in many cases, of pain and angst. Many of us have lost loved ones to the disease, and as this next winter wave looms large in our minds, we at NANR want you to know that you're not alone. To our elections officials throughout the country who have and continue to administer safe, secure, and legitimately valid elections year in and year out, and who have faced unprecedented levels of antipathy, subversion, and utter disrespect, we want you to know that we stand with you too. Keep the faith, keep up the good work. America has not turned her back on you. We had sincerely hoped that we could be together tonight, surrounded by the warmth of laughter, the furrowed brows of disagreement, and the clinking of glasses as foes become friends, united by a shared resolve to restore the republic in which we live, and to give voice and volume to all voters. And perhaps there's something poetic about the fact we're not together. Democracy reform itself can often be lonely at times. Taking on the political establishment often means that one or both parties are mad at you, and in those moments it's easy to question if you're doing the right thing. I'm reminded of the words of Frederick Douglass, who said, "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did and it never will." And I think if both sides are mad at you, it probably means you're doing the right thing. At NANR, we believe that a more fair and competitive election system will not only strengthen our democracy, but will also improve the responsiveness and the credibility of all parties. And we favor a robust competition of numerous political parties and independents as well, and a level playing field on which that can occur. In our common pursuit of this right and essential objective, we have created an association of cross-partisan, reform-oriented organizations and individuals that can facilitate shared resources, establish common objectives, and promote general efforts to provide more choices to voters and better representation to every citizen of the United States, regardless of party affiliation or non-affiliation. On that note, I'd like to welcome our first guest speaker, Dr. Jessie Fields, who is a tireless advocate for change, for civil rights, and for people of all stripes. Following Dr. Fields, we'll view a brief video from More Equitable Democracy, the organization run by our friend and colleague, George Chang.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Jessie Fields. I'm a medical doctor, and I've worked as a primary care physician in urban communities, in communities of color, for more than 30 years. I grew up in Philadelphia and went to medical school there and started practicing in the inner city community of Philadelphia around my medical school as a medical student and then a resident. And then I spent 5 years working in Chicago, on the west side of Chicago. I had a medical scholarship that paid for my education and sent me to Chicago. And when I was finished fulfilling that obligation, I moved to New York City, where I have been working for the last 3 decades in the Harlem community. I grew up in a poor African-American community and really saw the impact of poverty on my family and friends and neighborhood. And I wanted to become a doctor so that I could help people grow and transform the conditions of their lives, and really particularly for underserved communities to have greater opportunities to move forward. And I became a political activist and have been an independent for decades, and have been involved in building independent politics and the movement of independent voters to transform the two-party system. Something that I've been involved in a lot of community organizing, grassroots organizing in Harlem and other places, and have been advocating for better health care, for better access to quality, comprehensive health care, as well as the kind of social conditions that impact on people's health, from housing to community development, economic opportunities, educational opportunities, opportunities to grow and learn and have human development for our young people and our communities as a whole. And it has always seemed to me that the political process, the two-party system, has really failed communities of color and the American people in general in terms of the social conditions. Right now, we're in the middle of a 2-year crisis with the COVID pandemic. And certainly the impact of COVID has been disproportionate on communities of color. And that's because of ongoing chronic conditions in which people live. So for me, it's been one example of disenfranchisement has been the lack of opportunity for people to have a say and to be able to shape the environments in which they live. And I feel that the two-party system, and in communities of color, that two-party system is represented most directly by Democratic Party control. So it happens to be the case that the Democratic Party takes communities of color and poor communities, including African American communities, for granted. The Democratic Party takes communities of color for granted, and the Republican Party, for the most part, ignores poor communities and communities of color. And that system has not benefited the people of this country. And I think we need really to transform our political process from top to bottom. So I've been working to empower folks at the grassroots, and I have worked with many independent organizations, independent voting in particular, that I'm on the board of, working along with people like Jackie Salet, who's the president, and Kathy Stewart, who's an organizer, and many others. And of course, the independent movement was very much founded and led by Dr. Lenore Fulani, the first African American and the first woman to be on the ballot for president in all 50 states. And she ran in 1988 and achieved that accomplishment. And we're continuing to build that independent movement. Something that I've been also involved in is Open Primaries, which is a national organization that you probably are all familiar with. That's the president of Open Primaries, John Opdycke. And Open Primaries is doing some wonderful work, bringing open primaries around the country in different forms. We just had a victory recently in Maine, where actually the state legislature of Maine passed open primaries legislation. And it was really a coming together of Democrats, Republicans, and independents in a very inspiring coalition that was able to bring open primaries to Maine. Another activity that I'm involved in, that I've been working with very closely, is the issue of housing. And many of my patients live in public housing. I work in Harlem, and I've gotten involved in helping them to improve the conditions in which they live. There's a housing crisis in public housing. There's a housing crisis all over the country in terms of people being displaced and issues of gentrification. In New York City, New York City has the largest public housing development in the country. Over 600,000 people in New York City live in public housing, and that's obviously people who are of low income, very, very diverse people, mostly people of color, Black and Latinx, but it's very diverse, including Asian and white residents who live in public housing in New York City. And I've gotten involved in fighting to improve the housing as a doctor, as someone who's concerned about the community. And for me, that very much is an expression of the lack of of people having a voice through our political process. There's really no pathway for these communities to be able to change the process, to impact on politics. They're shut out. The political process is very much about insiders. The primaries are closed in New York, and ordinary folks just don't have a voice. So one of the things that I'm very excited about is the growth of independent politics and the opportunities to open up the process for all people. One of the democracy reforms that was passed actually at the end of 2020 in the general election in 2020 was in St. Louis. And I feel very excited about this development. And it's led to some good things for the city of St. Louis in 2021. And that was a reform, an open primaries, nonpartisan elections with approval voting that was passed in St. Louis. And one of the things I find so inspiring about that victory is that it included a majority of people who live in St. Louis. A very diverse coalition was put together that included leading activists from communities of color and activists who had been involved in the Black Lives Matter and the protests against the very, very profoundly unfortunate tragedy of the killing of Michael Brown in Ferguson, and activists, who've been involved in the communities and trying to empower the communities and speaking out and doing protests, as well as reform activists who came together and they formed this really diverse coalition, and they won their reform for open primaries, nonpartisan elections with approval voting by 68% of the voters of St. Louis, a very important victory. So I am interested in this sort of coming together of social activism and political and structural reform that is transforming our democracy, giving communities a greater voice and empowering communities through political restructuring. It's clear to independent voters all over the country who are very diverse and are continuing to grow in numbers. It's now the case that about 45% of registered voters in this country, in the United States, are independent voters. And that has been growing for decades. More and more people are seeing the failures of the two-party system and wanting to do something about that, and just really making statements of non-compliance with the political process as it exists, that we really need to transform our process. And my goal is to continue to work to bring people together from all communities to engage in opening up the process, to give a greater voice and greater participation for everyone. I really want to bring together people who've been locked out in so many different ways. And I am very, very proud of the tradition of the African American community in leading the fight for political reform, not only for people of color, but for all people. So the Voting Rights Act that was passed in the 1960s, there were so many demonstrations and rallies and marches that were led by Dr. King, and many, many people of all colors were involved in that. So we're very much continuing that tradition of civil rights and voting rights that was part of the leadership of the African American community in the United States. We consider the right of independent voters to participate in primaries to be one of those fundamental voting rights. That is, no one should have to join a political party in order to have the right to vote. So we're continuing with that effort around the country. And the issues of social activism and restructuring the political process, for me, are inseparable. To bring together everyone in this effort for equal voting rights, for a grassroots democracy and political reform, and transforming our political process. Now, in those efforts, when we're trying to do that, to bring together social activism, political restructuring, to move our country forward, we are up against the fierce opposition of the two parties, and in particular, in communities of color, the fierce opposition of the Democratic Party to structural transformation and to opening up the process of elections. So one thing that I'm really looking forward to in 2022 is growing opportunities to move forward in these efforts, in these struggles, in these movements, reimagining and revitalizing our democracy. So there are many exciting things happening. One exciting thing that I'm really looking forward to is the publication of a new book called The Independent Voter by Jackie Salit, who's the president of Independent Voting, and also authoring the book as well is Dr. Omar Ali, who's a university professor, very distinguished historian, and Tom Riley, who's also a professor, an academic with the Arizona State University. And so this is going to be a very wonderful book. It will be coming out in 2022, and I'm really looking forward to that. As well, we are involved in projects to help independent voters be able to speak out in the media. And one of those projects is a spokesperson training program that Independent Voting is doing. Our website, independentvoting.org. I encourage people to go on that website and check out all the wonderful work that we're involved in. And I also work in fields of education with young people. I teach at a medical school and also am very proud to be on the board of a nonprofit, the All-Stars Project. And every day, the All-Stars Project is bringing really performance opportunities, developmental performance opportunities to young people in poor communities all over the country. And we've continued to do that work through the pandemic, doing that work virtually a lot on Zoom and WhatsApp and so forth in those platforms. So it's really an honor and a pleasure to have this opportunity to speak with you of the National Association of Nonpartisan Reformers. It's a wonderful organization, and I hope you have a great summit. Thank you very much.
What a world we live in.
Who has the power?
Who has the power?
Who makes the changes?
What kind of change do we need?
What kind of change do we need?
We call it a democracy.
But does it really represent who we are?
Is the system broken?
Depends on what it's supposed to do.
Empty promises.
Political rhetoric.
Billionaires flying to space.
The winner-take-all two-party system
that always favored the white majority.
Progress has always come from the people.
The people who carry the burden of society.
Who make the system run.
But don't run the system.
We have power.
We have our voices.
But we need each other.
More equitable democracy will build on our current work with groups across the country by convening and supporting a cohort of 10 state-based organizations or coalitions serving communities of color. We will do this in 3 phases. First, research on the rules of the game for local elections and potential alternatives. Second, civic education and community-driven decision-making. Third, policy advocacy to advance racial justice through systems changes grounded in what impacted communities want and need.
To change electoral politics for good.
Being a part of the MED space is a really amazing opportunity to collaborate with more radical thinkers who also understand that our democracy doesn't uplift and value people who look like us and come from our experiences.
MED is an early believer, an early funder, an early promoter, and just so skilled at bringing people together in making sure that power is built locally and it stays there.
Being able to work with more equal democracy, we've been able to understand how do we navigate that relationship with national funders. Almost, I think of like a coach who creates a relationship with an athlete. We realize that you help us not just put out the fires of today, but to think in advance as well of how do we be strategic in the future.
The last time we talked to Heather, Carlos, and George, it was just really an authentic conversation centered around who we wanted to be as an organization and how we wanted to transform the state of Ohio. And MED is one of the few states when it comes to redistricting or ranked choice voting who just has not given up on Ohio. So we need that love, we need that support.
They're kind of our guardians when it comes to equal rights and voter registration and suppression. We rely heavily on them for a lot of the data that we need to get our work done here in Yakima Valley. So thank you, MED.
No matter our race, how we worship, or our zip code, we all deserve a voice in our democracy.
We're gonna know we're successful when people of color are in charge, when we're not just pulling a chair up to the table, but we are flipping the table and making it in our own image.
We're really guided by the principles of self-determination and liberation. Ultimately, we want to see formal systems change beginning at the local level. How do we center communities of color and build a system where all of our voices are heard?
Nothing about us without us.
Nothing about us without us.
Nothing about us without us. One of the most pressing structural issues facing our democracy today is gerrymandering. It's quite literally happening as we speak today. As politicians across the country actively jockey for influence and control of government at all levels. I'd like to welcome author David Daley, who's been following and writing about issues of redistricting and gerrymandering for several years. He's going to give us an update on where we stand today.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, everyone at the National Association of Nonpartisan Reformers. We're very, very grateful for the important work you are doing in this really important existential moment for our democracy. I wish I was coming to you with more optimistic and hopeful news, but I think, as we all know from the newspapers, this redistricting cycle has really been a partisan bloodbath for fair maps, for competitive districts. Even in many of our most competitive states, U.S. House and state legislative maps are likely frozen in place for several cycles, perhaps even another decade. When Paul Smith argued the Common Cause versus Rucho case at the U.S. Supreme Court in 2018, he warned that the failure to contain the worst excesses of this anti-democratic practice would lead to a festival of partisan gerrymandering, unlike any that the nation has ever seen. Indeed, according to multiple studies, the proposed or enacted maps in Ohio, Illinois, Wisconsin, Texas, Georgia, Maryland, New York, North Carolina, among others, are more aggressive than even the egregiously drawn maps enacted a decade ago. It is safe to say that partisan gerrymandering has never been a bigger problem. Lawmakers have entrenched themselves in power in Congress and state legislatures. The gerrymanders are intense, durable, and they are built to last for a decade. In many states, it will be extraordinarily difficult for a majority of voters to dislodge the party in power for the next decade. This is happening, of course, against the backdrop of a narrowly divided and bitterly polarized nation. There are several big factors at play and some major takeaways. Let me start there before talking about some of the individual states. Inaction by the U.S. Supreme Court has made matters worse. The Rucho decision effectively closed the doors to partisan gerrymandering claims in federal court, effectively giving lawmakers a green light and no speed limit on the advantages they can give themselves this cycle. This is also the first redistricting cycle since the Shelby County case ended the preclearance protections of the Voting Rights Act, which has allowed states like Texas, Alabama, Georgia, and others to enact maps without first winning approval of the Department of Justice, and has allowed lawmakers to reduce the political power of minority voters even in states where they are driving population growth. The lack of voting rights enforcement means it is easier to gerrymander in these states. Two, the closely divided nature of the U.S. House, only 5 seats currently separate the two parties, has made it so every district matters and has heightened the importance of redistricting. It is entirely likely that these maps alone could determine the future balance of power in the House. As a result, both parties have worked to maximize gains, protect their own seats, and dramatically reduce the number of competitive seats nationwide. 3, commissions and other reforms won by voters, almost always with overwhelming support across all party lines, have had mixed success. Citizen commissions, such as the ones in California, and by early accounts, those in Michigan and Colorado, have worked fairly well. Commissions that include politicians or political appointments have met bitter partisanship and often broken down. Partisans have worked to undercut them or hijack them where they can, such as Arizona. They have malfunctioned in Ohio and Virginia. Advisory commissions have been ignored by Utah's legislature, are likely to be ignored in New York. 4, the number of competitive seats is rapidly dwindling. In the states that have already finalized maps, the number of districts that had a competitive result in the 2020 presidential race within 5 points has tumbled from 23 all the way to 10. This matters because there are very few districts that vote for one party for president and the other for Congress. There are currently only 16 of those crossover districts remaining. When competitive districts like that disappear, Party primaries among base voters become the elections that matter most. Few states have emerged from this process with fair maps that give voters the power to pick their own representatives. There are, of course, very few redistricting angels. Both parties have long histories of bad behavior. This cycle, however, Republicans have had both greater opportunity and greater willingness to draw maps to their advantage. Here are some of the states that are in the most difficult places. I'd start with Ohio, where more than 70% of voters backed a 2018 constitutional amendment demanding transparency and partisan balance on new maps. But the commission, dominated by Republican office holders, surrendered its authority to the legislature without even considering a plan. The legislature then enacted a map that will enact either 12 Republicans and 3 Democrats, or perhaps even 13 Republicans and 2 Democrats. It guarantees one side about 80% of the seats in a state that went for Donald Trump 54-46. Legislation is already underway in state court. North Carolina is a similar story, a closely divided state. Donald Trump won here with 49.9% of the vote, while a Democratic governor won narrow re-election. It was a different story on gerrymandered maps, where Democratic candidates for the U.S. House won more overall votes, yet Republicans won 8 of 13 seats. The new maps bake in a larger edge. Republicans have ensured they will win 10, often 11 of the seats now, 14 House members. Illinois, the most aggressive Democratic gerrymander to date. New York could still top this. The 2011 map was relatively responsive. Democrats won 12 of 18 seats there in 2012. Then Republicans won 2 back in 2014 in a red year. This new map, however, all but ensures Democrats of 14 of the state's 17 districts. That's a gain of 1 for the Democrats and a loss of 2 for Republicans. Illinois loses a seat through reapportionment. Democrats take that away from the GOP. Perhaps most disappointingly, one of the 2 Republican seats being erased by Democrats is the district that elected Adam Kinzinger, one of the few Republicans willing to cross party lines, for example, and support the creation of the House Commission to investigate the events of January 6th. Texas gained 2 seats in Congress due to population growth, 95% of which was driven by Latino, Black, Asian, and other minority populations. Those groups, however, lose power under these new maps. These maps also erase the state's most competitive districts. Texas is a complex and rapidly changing state. It will likely only have 1 U.S. House seat that is competitive for the next decade. These are districts that have been redrawn to maximize partisan control in a state that is rapidly changing. Utah is an interesting state where the legislature ignored the recommendations of the independent commission adopted by voters in 2018 and enacted a gerrymandered map instead. This map splits Salt Lake City into 4 pieces, erasing the 1 competitive district in the state and creating 4 essentially uncompetitive seats for the next decade. Really quickly, elsewhere in Oklahoma, lawmakers redrew the only competitive district in a similar way as Utah did, dividing Oklahoma City into 3 solid red seats. In Maryland, despite the efforts of Governor Larry Hogan's advisory commission, lawmakers appear to be going with a new version of the 7-1 Democratic gerrymander from this last decade. They could even attempt to go for an 8-0 map. We're still waiting on Democrats in New York, who are expected to override the state's commission and enact a map of their own, resulting in at least 3 potential Democratic pickups, if not more. Democrats also gerrymandered themselves. The new seat in Oregon created a 5-1 map without a single competitive seat. Republicans appear likely to do the same with the new seat in Montana, and we are waiting to see what they will do in Kansas and Kentucky, states where 1 single Democratic member remains in the delegation quite vulnerably. 2018, of course, 2020, voters attempted to rein in some of these partisan gerrymanders and to put various constraints on lawmakers. I think it's worth a quick look at how some of those commissions held up. In Missouri, of course, lawmakers managed to override those citizen efforts in 2020. and effectively undo the clean Missouri amendment that so resoundingly passed in 2018. In Colorado, it's so far so good. That commission has had its work approved by the state Supreme Court. It's a little early to tell in Michigan and California, states that have not yet finalized new maps. Indications are, however, that those commissions will succeed. What we've seen elsewhere, however, is that the process has really broken down under political pressure in Virginia, where maps will now be drawn by court-appointed masters, as well as in Washington state. The reforms in Ohio have not resulted in fair maps so far, but reformers will stand a better chance in state Supreme Court than they did in the legislature. What I think we have in our favor, in our side as nonpartisan reformers as we look to the next decade, is that voters really do understand the dangers of gerrymandering, and that if there's one thing that still unites us, whether we are in red states, in blue states, in purple states, we all hate partisan gerrymandering. We want to see this finished. It pulls us together as Americans, this need for meaningful elections, for competitive elections, for representation that accurately reflects a community that is responsive to changes in the electorate. The fight goes on. I'm proud to be in it with all of you.
Thanks, David. Now, the thing about gerrymandering is it isn't just about maps. It's about representation, fairness, and accountability. Gerrymandering is both a catalyst for and a symptom of something larger, something more dangerous. And as our friends at RepresentUs would say, it's a sign of electile dysfunction.
Is your democracy flaccid? Trouble maintaining a strong coalition? Tired of the parade of disappointing performances? Then you might be one of the 330 million Americans suffering from electile dysfunction.
I get all excited about a new bill.
The debate gets all hot and heated.
We'll move things to the floor.
And right when we're about to achieve a joint resolution, bam.
Total government shutdown.
Premature capitulation.
I don't know, every time I get an election, I think, maybe this time will be different.
Filibustering just doesn't make me feel good anymore.
It's embarrassing, okay?
Fortunately, there's the Freedom to Vote Act.
The Freedom to Vote Act?
What's the Freedom to Vote Act?
The Freedom to Vote Act, what does that mean?
The Freedom to Vote Act ends your tired, sagging, floppy relationship with politics by making Election Day a holiday across the country, banning gerrymandering, expanding voter access, increasing integrity, blocking foreign interference, empowering everyday citizens, and healing our democracy.
Now my election is rock solid, and it works everywhere.
Oh, it works everywhere.
And it's safe.
It used to take me forever to find the location.
To vote. But with the FTVA, we have all day to get to the polls.
And it only takes 2 minutes.
Which I prefer, honestly.
She really does.
The Freedom to Vote Act is only for democracies healthy enough for electoral activity. Talk to your representative if you are experiencing greased palms, lined pockets, dictators, neo-fascists, or other pre-existing conditions, as you may not be healthy enough for the FTVA. Passing FTVA may cause an increase in being heard, power, a full expression of your inalienable rights, representation, and a rare federal condition called accountability. If you experience voting lines that last over 4 hours, call your senator, as they have not passed the FTVA. Talk to your senator about the Freedom to Vote Act and demand safer and more satisfying elections today.
One of the most vibrant areas of growth in the pro-voter movement is reforms that ensure that all voters can vote. Now, that may seem obvious or perhaps even trivial, but as the following NANR members will attest, opening elections to voters who choose to affiliate with parties beyond Big Red and Big Blue, and even with voters who choose not to affiliate with any political party, is absolutely crucial to a functional representative democracy. Let's hear from some of our members who work in this area.
Hi, I'm John Palmer. I'm really happy to be here today. I'm a longtime electoral reform advocate, and I'm a believer that we need more competition in our political world. That two parties is not enough. And I think we're all seeing the evidence of why that's not enough this day and age. I'm a believer that the duopoly, as we call it, is a function of a bunch of different things. Plurality, winners of elections that causes a spoiler effect, closed primaries, gerrymandering, the money machine that's really built for two parties, closed debates, the list goes on. But one of the things that's not talked about as often as it should be is ballot access, which is where the two parties do their best to prevent outside party candidates and independents from getting on the ballot. There is work being done in this area, but it doesn't get the attention that it should, which is why I'm going to cede the rest of my time today to Oliver Hall from the Center for Competitive Democracy. Oliver and a few others have been doing great work in this area, and I wanted you to know about it. So I'd like to hand it over to Oliver now to tell you more about his work and his center.
Thanks very much, John. The Center for Competitive Democracy was founded in 2005 to strengthen American democracy by increasing electoral competition. Far too often, the electoral process fails to provide voters with meaningful choices at the polls. Incumbents run unopposed or candidates face no real competition, which means the outcome of the election is effectively predetermined before the first vote is cast. That is a fundamental and systemic failure of the democratic process. There are many reasons for this system failure, but among the most important are overly restrictive and discriminatory state ballot access laws, which guarantee major party nominees access at taxpayer expense, but make it difficult, if not impossible, for their competitors to run. That's primarily due to the large number of signatures that independents and minor parties must submit to qualify for the ballot. We bring constitutional challenges to these laws and have won some significant victories. We won a case striking down Pennsylvania's signature requirement that ranged as high as 77,000 signatures and established a flat 5,000 signature requirement in that state. We won a case striking down Michigan's 30,000 signature requirement and established a flat 12,000 signature requirement in that state. Most recently, we won a case striking down Maine's requirements for establishing a new political party, and we're now working on an appropriate remedy in that case. We also won cases in Illinois and Maryland that arose during the COVID pandemic, which required that those states authorize electronic petitioning procedures. Looking forward, we're building on these precedents in an effort to implement electronic petitioning procedures nationwide. There's no reason that states should continue to require that independents and minor parties follow centuries-old petitioning procedures to qualify for the ballot in the 21st century. It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to comply with many state signature requirements, and we're challenging that cost as an unconstitutional barrier to participation in the political process. We have cases pending in Texas and Illinois that rely on that theory, and we'll be filing new challenges in additional states soon. Ultimately, our goal is an open and competitive process that enables citizens to cast their votes effectively for candidates who represent their views. It's a radical idea, but only in the sense that it's what the founders had in mind when they framed our Constitution. Thank you.
Hi, I'm John Opdycke. I'm the president of Open Primaries. We do a lot at Open Primaries. First of all, there are so many Americans from diverse backgrounds who are beginning to look at the problem with our partisan primary system, how it not only excludes millions of voters, but incentivizes partisan behavior, gridlock, a lack of problem solvers, and contributes in a multitude of ways to the subpar performance of so many state legislatures and certainly Congress. So we provide tools and strategies and ideas and research, polling, tactics to help and support these local leaders to develop primary reform efforts where they live. The second thing we do is we insist very loudly that the institutional discrimination against independent voters is a voting rights issue that our country needs to deal with. The political reform movement needs to deal with it. And that makes some people in the political reform space a little uncomfortable. I think there's a tendency to want to focus on the fixes to the political problems that we face and not pay attention to the statement that so many Americans are making about the ways in which they don't want to participate in Democratic and Republican Party politics is currently organized. And that is something we think is extremely important and needs to be paid attention to. So, is that a significant contribution to the reform conversation, or are we simply a pain in the ass? I let you decide.
Hello, my name is Chad Peace. I sit on the board of NANR as a representative of IVC Media. We do what we call nonpartisan digital communications, offices in Tijuana and San Diego. I'm here on the NANR board because we got into this space because the Independent Voter Project approached me and my then and current business partner about 14 years ago now to do the voter education program for California's top 2 nonpartisan primary. That kind of spurred my personal passion for looking at the election system as really the source of a lot of voter grievances. And since that time, been working for, folks passing ranked choice voting in Maine. We're currently right now working on a top 5 ranked choice voting initiative in San Diego. And I've been very happy and proud to be a part of this great group that's come together to look at our election systems and try to redesign them so that the incentives are to elect leaders that represent more broadly and we end up with a better governance.
Oh, hello. Come on in and welcome to my office. So what's that you say? You'd like to learn about the history of books, pamphlets, and treatises on independence and how they each stoked the fires of a movement? Well, let me tell you. We begin with Tom Paine's Common Sense, published in Philadelphia in 1776. Et voila. In this long pamphlet, Paine presents an eloquent argument that Americans had a unique opportunity to change the course of history by creating a new kind of government, one in which people had the power to rule themselves. Let's move forward in time. We have C. Vann Woodward's book called The Strange Career of Jim Crow, published in 1955. In it, he outlines the background to the burgeoning movement for Black civil and political rights. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. described the book as, quote, the Bible of the civil rights movement. Now, that's a great blurb. Which brings us to the present. Hot off the press, friends, a book called The Independent Voter. It's going to be published by Routledge Press next year. Authored by whom, you ask? By yours truly, along with Tom Riley and Jackie Saylor. In the book, we explore how independents have been catalysts for change throughout American history, from Tom Paine's generation of revolutionaries to the foot soldiers of the modern civil rights movement to today's independent voters. We not only look at the barriers independents face, but the opportunities at hand to remake today's political, cultural, and legal landscape through the demand for recognition, respect, and reform. We'll be eager to hear what you think about the book, which really is all about you.
Ensuring that all voters can vote is only half the battle. The other half is about how we vote. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has fundamentally changed the way Americans think about voting and the method they choose to cast their ballot. In 2020 and 2021, we saw record numbers of Americans opt to vote from home and safely and securely cast their ballots by mail. Now, I've personally been voting by mail for about 5 years, and I can attest that it is incredibly convenient. The issue of how we vote goes beyond the election date and how we submit our ballots, though. It also includes the methodology of vote scoring. Alternative methods of voting, such as ranked choice voting and approval voting, have been around for decades, and we saw some really key gains in 2020 and 21. Joining us now are representatives from several NANR members, Vote From Home Coalition, Fair Vote, Rank the Vote, and the Institute for Political Innovation.
Hi, I'm Lori Augino, the new Executive Director for the National Vote at Home Institute. At Vote at Home, we're focused on supporting elections officials and policymakers across the country so they can deploy the most secure, trusted, and accessible mail ballot elections. Our ultimate vision is for every voter to receive a ballot through the mail, with the voter having the option to return it postage-free through the mail, to a ballot drop box conveniently located near the voter, to any voting center or polling place, or directly to the elections office. We recognize that moving to a full vote-at-home system is a journey, and our staff with over 50 years of hands-on state and local elections experience make us uniquely qualified to work with elections officials and policymakers on voter-centric best practices and policies for mail balloting wherever the state is on the vote-at-home path. It's important to not just design good policy, but to make sure it's properly implemented. We work to ensure the elections officials have the technical expertise and support to do their job effectively. I'm excited to be a part of the National Association of Nonpartisan Reformers, where we can all work together to augment and support each other's efforts to improve elections and support voter-centric policies across the country.
Hi, I'm Katie Dahl with Fair Vote. We are a nonpartisan organization seeking better elections for all. We research and advance voting reforms that make democracy more functional and representative for every American. Fair Vote is the nation's leading advocate for ranked choice voting. We think if we want to truly fix our democracy, we need to pass comprehensive electoral reform in Congress. And for us, that means winning the Fair Representation Act to replace winner-take-all elections and implementing ranked choice voting across the nation. And we're doing three things related to that. We are working to build congressional buy-in and wins. We're having conversations with some of the most influential stakeholders in our politics to forge new alliances and build a strong and diverse coalition of support. And lastly, we are providing movement support for state and local advocates of ranked choice voting.
Hi, my name's Nathan Lockwood. I'm Executive Director of Rank the Vote. I'm speaking today on behalf of the entire team. Together with 27 independent state partners, we're focused on growing awareness and support for ranked choice voting. This builds the energy and resources to help successfully win RCV enactment campaigns and legislative efforts in cities and in states. Here's a little end-of-year update. Over the past 12 months, our partners have more than tripled the number of RCV supporters in their network to over 30,000, and they've signed up 4,000 volunteers. This work is being orchestrated by 300 very dedicated volunteer state leaders. These grassroots groups are beginning to translate this growth in volunteers and supporters into municipal wins. This November, Rank My Vote led a successful campaign in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where voters approved RCV at 72% in favor. Rank the Vote provided assistance where needed alongside of national RCV partners like RepresentUs and Unite America, who provided campaign funding and support, and Fair Vote, who provided extensive consultation and guidance. Rank the Vote Ohio, Voter Choice Arizona, Fair Vote Illinois, Missourians for Ranked Choice Voting, Rank My Vote, the California RCV Coalition, More Choice San Diego, RCV for Fort Collins, and others are actively involved in or planning municipal campaigns now. Going into the new year, we're working with our national RCV partners more closely than ever, strategically and operationally, to maximize the effectiveness of our state partners. We think this is going to translate into another great year for grassroots growth of ranked choice voting. There's another big takeaway from 2021 that speaks to the combined value of our many organizations in NANR with a variety of missions. The first RCV election in the 21st century in New York City highlights the transformative possibilities of what can happen when a number of different reforms come together. New York City had adopted robust election financing reforms, term limits that created open seats, and there were organizations encouraging and supporting women candidates. And then, of course, there was ranked choice voting. The combined effect of these reforms was something activists might only dream of, more than doubling women's representation on New York City's City Council from 27% to a very strong majority of 61%. Thank you for what you do. Rank the Vote is so happy to be working with you as part of NANR.
Hello, my name is Solomon Lieberman, and I am the co-executive director with Aaron Menenberg of the Institute for Political Innovation, or IPI, based here in Chicago. I'm also proud to serve on the board of the National Association of Nonpartisan Reformers, or NANR, and would like to thank Andy and everyone on his team at NANR for bringing us all together today. Over the past year, IPI has quickly matured from a group of 4 people working out of their guest rooms to a robust team of 15 people, and we have an actual office now too. I'm so proud to be working with them. We've also met the urgency we all feel in America today and accelerated our efforts to support Final 5 voting campaigns in the states. We are confident that there will be multiple local coalitions formed in 2022. Our work has also been validated by tremendous support from the business and philanthropic communities, and for that we are grateful. We have gone from being funded by a single donor at our founding to now having the support of more than 50 individual donors and several foundations. Now, IPI is an action-oriented organization, to be sure, but we're also becoming a proper institute, growing into our name. 2021 saw expansions in our research, having just published our first collaborative effort with university professors to study the potential impacts of Final Five voting on communities of color. Critical work. IPI has also been gaining traction at the grassroots level. Our founder and chair, Catherine Gale's TED Talk, has been viewed over 1 million times, bringing her insights from her work on politics industry theory to people from coast to coast. We also produced a 4-part series of animated videos called The Myths of American Politics, which I think are worth a watch and share. Like for many of you, our first full year as an organization has had triumphs as well as struggles. We've grappled with how best to survive and thrive through the fog of the pandemic as humans, while also serving our mission. We've also worked hard to find the right balance between offering what we think is our best theory of change to other leaders, while being careful to support those leaders in building campaigns that are right for their communities or their state. And like all of you, we are deeply engaged with other reformers on how best to serve our shared goal, a strong democracy that is empowered to solve policy problems before political problems. But all of this would be harder and less fun and fulfilling without the NANR community to lean on. We are all in this together, truly. On behalf of everyone here at IPI, thank you and keep up the great work.
Now, by this point in the conversation, many of you are probably thinking, this is all fine and good, Andy, but what about all the money and corruption in government, right? That's the real problem. Now, I hear you. All of these issues are interwoven. And the great thing about democracy reform is that there are so many dynamic organizations working on each of these issues, and that it allows them to specialize in one or two and go really deep out there without feeling like they have to do a little bit of everything. Now, to that end, we're going to turn it over to Jeff Clements with American Promise to hear about their efforts to reduce corruption in our government by overturning Citizens United.
Hello, I'm Jeff Clements, president of American Promise and a board member of the National Association of Nonpartisan Reformers. At American Promise, we are Americans, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, uniting to take on the number one problem that every American knows we need to fix if we're going to move ahead. And that's the corruption of out-of-control money in our political system. We embrace the constitutional amendment that it's going to take to get the job done. And with this amendment, we say yes to the voices, ideas, and free speech of all Americans, anywhere in the country, and all voters. But we say no to money that dominates and drowns out Americans, whether that's from foreign governments, global corporations, big unions, or billionaires. In 2021, we saw more momentum for this national cause than ever before. Proposals for the constitutional amendment were endorsed by the cross-partisan, nonpartisan, Our Common Purpose Commission, and were introduced in Congress. And our campaigns in states like Pennsylvania, Maine, Wisconsin, Ohio, and many more are adding to the pressure from the dozens of states that have already taken formal action to press Congress for action and get this constitutional amendment to the states and the people for ratification. The cause is bigger than politics, and our approach has opened up our common work for reform to new voices and new perspectives that can work together. Let me turn it over to Dr. Jessica Hare, my colleague, American Promise Vice President of Outreach over in Atlanta, Georgia.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, National Association of Nonpartisan Reformers. As Jeff mentioned, my name is Dr. Jessica Hare, Vice President of Outreach, and I came to American Promise a little over a year ago with a background in social work. I came during a very challenging time, not only for our country and our nation, but a challenging time for everyday Americans like myself and you. For example, with me, being a single mom to 3 very active young children, trying to homeschool them while working and also advocating for such a great cause as getting money out of politics, we certainly hit a few bumps along the way. The work that we are doing here at American Promise certainly involves face-to-face interaction, team building, community building, and activities that will empower and inspire everyday Americans to let their voices be heard. We have been very successful and continue to be successful here at American Promise despite the challenges that we face with the pandemic. For example, we recently just collected thousands and thousands of signatures with our main ballot initiative. We also participated in our 2021 Citizens Lobby Day trainings and activities. So as you can see, we're very, very, very busy here at American Promise, and we encourage you to join in on the fun and the action. You can visit our website at americanpromise.net to see how you can become involved in your state and in your community. As you can see, I have on my holiday pajamas, so I wish you and your family a very happy holiday season, and I look forward to connecting with you all in the future.
Every week we hear talking heads on television telling us that America is closely divided, or America hasn't been this divided since the Civil War. I guess I'm currently the talking head on your screen, and well, I gotta say, they're right. We are very divided. But what those tasty sound bites often don't tell you is that there's also a lot of agreement on how to make things better. One of the founding members of NANR, Citizen Data, recently published the American Right Democracy Roadmap, which is a compendium report about conservatives in America. Their findings affirm that while politics and polarization puts our democracy at increasing risk, opportunities exist to reach pragmatic voters on the right and engage them in efforts to strengthen democracy and address other pressing national issues. Moreover, using innovative tools like the ones at Citizen Data, we can identify and inoculate those right-of-center voters who are most vulnerable to disinformation. A number of NANR members are already doing that work, reaching voters across the political spectrum and bringing them to the table. One such example is Take Back Our Republic, a conservative organization that spreads the good news of reform to conservative voters using messaging and tactics that are tailored to that audience. Let's hear from two of the members of their leadership staff now.
Take Back Our Republic is a premier grassroots organization of conservatives concerned about the future of our country. We are dedicated to protecting and activating the voices of every American in our political system. We've done the hard work of building a network of local conservative leaders that span the country. The future of TBOR is bringing the conservative values of our grassroots members to more policy conversations. And because we have a strong network, we can choose the conversations for engagement in response to the priorities of our membership. We know that TBOR members care about free, fair, and honest elections that are open and accessible to every American. We believe we can protect the freedom of speech, expression, while elevating our political culture. We believe economic and environmental stewardship work hand in hand instead of at cross purposes. As we work to secure a fair political process in America, we can also work to empower our grassroots leaders to speak out on more issues. Together, we make a difference and hold our elected officials accountable and ultimately return the power back to we the people. Since TBOR's inception in 2014, we have seen great organizational growth with increases in media coverage of TBOR mission-related activities. We have over 215 state coordinators in 48 states. In 2021, we have made the incredible progress in expanding our reach and activating state coordinators across the country. We started the year working in Utah with a coalition of other organizations to educate about the benefits of ranked choice voting. This provided great opportunities to strengthen our TBOR Western chapter. Our Western Field Director also participated in civics education forums to combat the dangerous 1619 Project and critical race theory curriculums that are being pushed on children in our public schools. In Virginia, we work to lead the effort to address campaign finance reform issues in the state. Our work led to the Virginia Senate blocking the personal use of campaign funds. In Wisconsin, TBOR established a strong state chapter to educate on another form of ranked choice voting called Final Five voting. This project led to many tours of the state and an increased awareness around the state about the more inclusive way to vote. In Wyoming, Tibor held a state chapter kickoff event on the 4th of July weekend with over 100 people in attendance. This was a great event that yielded new state coordinators and donors. Tibor's staff also knocked on 700 plus doors in the Cheyenne, Wyoming area and educated locals on the benefits of instant runoffs. In West Virginia, field staff spent the summer traveling the state, meeting with local GOP groups, businesses, and veterans groups to introduce Tibor's mission to the state and to encourage Senators Manchin and Capito to support legislation that strengthened our election security. Over 2,500 calls and letters were sent to West Virginians to their Senate offices. Take Back Our Republic also had a great presence in the media in 2021 with over 70 mentions in national media outlets. Important media mentions included op-eds about the dangerous attempt to pack the Supreme Court and the benefits of election reform across the country. Also, board member Dr. Richard Painter was featured on Fox News and other national media outlets to talk about pay-for-play politics accusations surrounding President Biden and China and Hunter Biden's dark money art sales scheme. Tibor has recently learned that the Federal Elections Commission has ruled foreign donors can finance U.S. referendum campaigns, potentially opening the floodgates to foreign spending on fights over high-profile policy issues. We are currently organizing petitions in each state that does not outlaw foreign funding in referendum campaigns to encourage state legislators to make the necessary change to protect America's voices in government. I will now turn it over to our Deputy Director, Justin Hill, to go over highlights of what Tibor will be doing and working on in 2022.
Thank you, Francis. In 2022, Take Back Our Republic will be supporting these reforms. First off, instant runoffs. In the past, we've supported efforts in Georgia and Wyoming, but in 2022, California will be our main state focus. Instant runoffs save millions of dollars versus traditional runoffs, and voter participation is higher since there's no need to return to the polls weeks later. Secondly, gerrymandering reform. In the past, we've supported Ohio's push to move to an independent redistricting committee. We ran a strong earned media campaign in Michigan leading up to the state Supreme Court ruling to allow Michigan residents to vote on redistricting efforts. And we'll be continuing efforts to end gerrymandering will be one of Tibor's top priorities in 2022. Thirdly, dark money. The FEC recently voted to allow foreign entities to donate to ballot initiatives in the U.S. This ruling opens the floodgates to untold amounts of money from outside the U.S. to flood in and affect important issues on the ballot across the country. This also allows for another avenue for foreign businesses to participate in what we call the pay-to-play scheme. Foreign businesses can give money to sway ballot initiative votes that could directly affect their businesses and the interests that they have. Fourthly is pay-to-play politics. Pay-to-play politics doesn't always mean money changes hands. There are cases where pay-to-play can mean favors are done, like giving a longtime supporter a prestigious position or a title, or hiring a family member for a job position. Tibor will continue to be the leading conservative voice on these important issues going into 2022 and for years to come. Thank you.
We've seen tremendous growth in cross-partisan interest in democracy reform this year. Voters are more and more frustrated and disappointed by the partisan gridlock and grandstanding we see in Washington and too often in our state capitals as well. Volunteers are connecting around common missions. New organizations are birthed to reach specific constituencies, and cutting-edge tools are being implemented to help voters find and connect with those causes and the groups that ignite their passions. This is the new growth on the tree of democracy. And so we're now going to hear from Todd Connor of Veterans for Political Innovation, Richard Phelps with the Nonpartisan Education Group, and a brief video about an exciting new website that you may have heard about called Citizen Connect.
Greetings, nonpartisan reformers. You are our people. This is Todd Connor. I'm the CEO of Veterans for Political Innovation. We're a nascent organization, just about 5 months old. But I'm so happy to report on some of the great progress that we've been able to make, really as a contributor to our collective fight. You know, this ecosystem of effort that is underway, we are so honored to be a part of and join you all for the work that you've been doing, and hopefully for us to be a conduit to bring the military community into the critical and urgent and patriotic conversation about how we can stabilize American democracy, bring more choices to the American people, and make sure that this polarization crisis that we're facing doesn't cripple and cater democracy as we know it. So Veterans for Political Innovation consider us a friend, a partner in the fight. We've been active on the ground in places like Wisconsin, in places like St. Louis and Missouri, in Illinois and in Chicago, in Nevada and Colorado, San Diego, Maine, Alaska, Connecticut, Florida, and lots of other places as well. Our goal is to bring veterans into the fight. We're going to organize at a state-based level. We're going to identify volunteer leaders in all of the states in which we choose to operate. And then our plan and our strategy is really to partner with state-based organizations. Like Wisconsin's a great example of this, where Democracy Found is on the ground doing great work to advocate for Final Five voting. And Veterans for Political Innovation can come alongside and really leverage the veteran community as unique messengers for op-eds, for messaging, for grassroots engagement, for veteran to veteran lobbying to other elected officials who themselves are veterans. These are some of the unique kind of roles that we can play. And so let's start a conversation, if we aren't already having one, about what Veterans for Political Innovation can do to partner with you in your community for your line of effort. And our plan is to be around for as long as this work is required. We've got some great early funders. We plan to scale. We plan to have people in all 50 states and plan to have active campaigns in probably 6 to 8 states where we think that Final Five voting, some combination of open primaries and ranked choice voting is possible. So we're excited to be in the fight. Please reach out to us. We're at veteransforpoliticalinnovation.org, and we will be seeing you soon. Enjoy the summit.
Hello, I'm going to introduce the Nonpartisan Education Group by reading an excerpt from the About Us page at our online scholarly journal, the Nonpartisan Education Review. Its language was approved by our entire group, and it is short, so here goes. There are two sides to every U.S. education policy debate, and that is a problem. These two sides, public education's entrenched groups allied with the Democratic and Republican parties, represent their own interests more than the public's. Yet, with the cooperation of many education journalists and some wealthy foundations, these groups have become the source of virtually all the information provided the public about education policy. Much high quality and trustworthy education research and information does not find its way into education policy discussions. Its path is blocked by a wall of interest groups, think tanks, federally funded research centers, and well-funded advocacy groups that suppress or dismiss information they dislike. These organized groups have the resources to push their agenda, saturating the media and the web with their own version of reality. Imagine what would happen to the progress of humanity if, in the fields of, say, biology and medicine, the only information ever made public came from organized interest groups, and all independent research and information was suppressed. Understanding that may help explain why our country's education policy is stuck. It is mired in misinformation. It is our conviction that some of the organizations allied with the two education establishments do our country more harm than good, primarily through their censorship of education research and information that they do not like. Indeed, it has become commonplace for the education groups aligned with the two sides to openly declare that vast regions of the education research literature do not exist. It may seem, it may seem quixotic, but in this polarized, overly politicized world of education research, we aim to be truly independent. We are affiliated with no group or organization with any political power. We embrace those not on either side. We are the Nonpartisan Education Group. Thank you.
America has a choice to make. Choosing to continue down the path we're on will only fuel the politics of anger and division. Choosing to look beyond our differences to what makes us one is what can connect us again as Americans. Citizen Connect is a nonpartisan platform committed to finding common ground and dedicated to the old-fashioned civic duty of getting things done. We don't have an agenda. We're not here to help you choose a side. We're here to help you get involved. To lend a hand in healing America by connecting you with events and organizations dedicated to bringing our country together. Election reform, civic education, bridging personal and political differences. Hundreds of organizations, large and small, founded by Republicans, Democrats, and independents, all in one place, and all with the same goal. Just point, click, and you're part of the solution. As a country, we have a choice to make. It's not about who you're fighting with. It's about what we're fighting for. And the only way we can make America work is by working together. Join us now at Citizen Connect. Let's get to work.
Earlier this year, NANR began an in-depth strategic planning process to really examine who we are and what we do. We spent hours conducting surveys and interviews with our members and others in the democracy ecosystem. We celebrated our strengths, we admitted our weaknesses, we identified areas of opportunity and the challenges that may arise as we do our work. In the end, it all boils down to three things that NANR does best: convene, connect, and catalyze. We bring together the top minds in the organizations who are leading the charge in democracy reform and help get them to the table with one another to chart a collective, coordinated course of action. We connect reformers throughout the country with one another and to the resources they need to do their work more effectively and more efficiently. And we help our members turn plans and purpose into action in order to win reforms in their communities. Change doesn't happen overnight, of course, and it's the result of countless hours and years of hard work, building the relationships necessary so that when the time is right, liftoff can occur. That is the case in San Diego, where nearly a dozen NANR members are working together to adopt ranked choice voting for their town. Let's hear more from some of the folks in the More Choice San Diego Coalition about this exciting work.
Thank you, Andy, and welcome everyone to the conversation with members of the More Choice San Diego Coalition. Next, you're going to hear from a few of our members. My name is Victoria Barba, and I'm the outreach coordinator for the coalition. And just to give you an idea of who all is a member of our coalition, we have members from RepresentUs San Diego, League of Women Voters of San Diego, the Community Advocates for Just and Moral Governance, also known as MOGO, Independent Voter Project. We also have NANR as a member, and Take Back Our Republic, Business for America, Call RCV, Represent Women, Rank the Vote, The People, and many others. And with that said, I will pass it along to Lori from League of Women Voters San Diego.
Thank you, Victoria. Yeah, it's been really great. It's been a great experience to be participating in this coalition. We were early members of this. We were part of the founding group that put this coalition together because the League of Women Voters, which I represent here on this coalition, was founded on voting rights and voter empowerment. So we're a 100-year-old organization. We were founded in 1920 along with the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. And our organization was founded to support this new contingent of voters and give them the information and the opportunities they needed to be thoroughly participating in their democracy. And so we have been interested in our democracy and voting rights and election reform fundamentally for 100 years. And this organization has given us an opportunity to really make a difference in San Diego and the way we conduct elections here and the way our voters here are heard and the way they get to express their opinions and their positions here. So it's been a really good situation for us. It's been a perfect synergy for an organization like ours that values voters and voting rights. And ranked choice voting is one of those improvements and one of those electoral reforms that really gives voters the opportunity to express themselves. We are a voter-centric organization. We are nonpartisan. We have never in 100 years supported or opposed candidates or parties. And so our focus on the voter and the voters' rights and opportunities and engagement has made this experience for me and for our league here in San Diego just monumentally gratifying. It's just been a very good situation for us, and we're delighted to be a part of this coalition. And with that, I'll hand it over to another coalition member who is one of the founding members as well, Amy Tobia.
Hi, thanks so much, Lori. My name is Amy Tobia, and I am one of the chapter leaders of the San Diego chapter of RepresentUs. And RepresentUs is the new kid on the block when it comes to election reform. We've been around for 10 years now and 5 years in San Diego. And much like the League of Women Voters, we feel that fair elections that empower voters are incredibly important. We also pursue a lot of anti-corruption reforms. And so for us, joining the More Choice Coalition and seeking to bring ranked choice voting to the San Diego election landscape is very important. It does a couple of things. It enables voters to be thoroughly heard as they are able to then express themselves fully on their ballot. And it also allows us to change a little bit the nature of our election process and create more of a conversation, more of a policy-driven approach that we hope will empower more women to run for office in San Diego and to be more successful here. So our local coalition has been happy to join. We have tried this already in the past. We started this campaign right before COVID. And as many others out there have done the same. Of course, it's very, very hard to work in the community and try and convince people that we need to change the way that we elect our officials for mayor, city council, and city attorney when you're in the middle of a pandemic. People have a lot on their hands. And so we struggled, but came within one council vote of getting onto the ballot in spite of COVID. And so we're very excited to take another run at this. In the meantime, we've been able to expand our coalition and also rethink parts of what we were trying to achieve. So we've made a few changes. We've revised from top 4 to top 5 ranked choice voting. So we will allow everyone to be able to rank candidates in the general election. We've also done some studies as to potentially including the school board. And along the way, of course, we've continued to do outreach in the community with additional community groups and bringing new members on board. So we're very excited about the possibility of getting that extra vote this time around and getting across the finish line because we do think that if we can get on the ballot in 2022, we will get enough votes to be enacted and be using ranked choice voting in San Diego by 2024. So one of the things that I think is really interesting when you talk about ranked choice voting in San Diego is how San Diego starts from a different place than other communities that might be pursuing ranked choice voting. In San Diego, we have open primaries to start with. We also have a top 2 system. So our elections are always decided at the general election, and we always have a primary. When we started engaging in the community and talking to different civic groups that are very interested in voting in election reform, we found that there was concern because we have synchronous elections where we have a primary with all of our county and our national and our local elections all at the same time. that there was concern about just eliminating the primary for these few city races that we were looking at doing. So we had to navigate that, and we had to talk to the different coalition partners and come up with a solution for that. We really wanted to make sure that we had a robust general election. So we wanted to move from a top 2 to a top 4 or 5. And we had to navigate, well, what would that do to the cycle of a campaign and a candidacy here in San Diego? So it made for different coalition building than I think some of the folks pursuing ranked choice voting throughout the country are having, because we were starting from a different place. So I think what we learned from that's really important is, for one, not to assume that just because somebody is a supporter of better elections, that they're going to support you changing their elections. That was a bit of a surprise to us. The other thing that I think was really important is that when you're talking about ranked choice voting, it's really important to talk about the benefits that are going to come after, because regardless of where you start, if you're starting with open primaries, closed primaries, if you're talking about using it in a primary election or a general election, no matter what the application is, the benefits of ranked choice voting are what you're pursuing. The transformation into what it's like to run as a candidate, the transformation into what it's like to vote as a voter, and the change in the values and the behaviors once you're elected and you're trying to get reelected with ranked choice voting. So I think that's one of the things that our coalition learned that I think others could benefit from, even though, again, we started in a different place.
Thank you, Amy. With that said, I would like to invite everyone to visit morechoicesd.org. There you'll be able to learn more about us, sign up to get updates, donate, and join the team. Our email is contact@morechoicesd.org. Thank you.
As we near the end of our event, I want to leave you with a word about what you can expect from NANR in 2022. As I mentioned earlier, we are committed to 3 things: convening, connecting, and catalyzing, to help propel the democracy reform movement forward into the midterm elections next year. We will continue our monthly Reformers Unite education and networking meetings. These sessions are a really great opportunity to hear from and connect with others working on similar issues throughout the country. Also, in early 2022, we will be launching our Leadership Masterclass, a training certificate program for organizational leaders that will cover a range of hard and soft skills, including fundraising, finance, burnout, how to communicate with everyone you meet, and more importantly, how to be a leader worth following. We have some really excellent guest speakers for that series, and I'm super excited about it. Now, both the Reformers Unite series and the Leadership Masterclass are free for our members to attend, and there's a small number of tickets that will be available for purchase for non-members. But speaking of membership, in response to feedback received during our strategic planning process, we're going to be rolling out an updated membership structure for 2022. Details about that and the events I mentioned will be hitting your inboxes in the next couple of weeks. Thank you so much for your time, for your passion, for your dedication, and for your hard work. This video will be available on our YouTube channel, and we encourage you to share it within your networks with your friends and family. If you haven't already done so, please also consider subscribing to our podcast, How to Win Friends and Save the Republic, which highlights the people and the issues that are driving democracy reform today. It's available on Anchor, Apple, Spotify, and, well, just anywhere else that podcasts live these days. We hope to see you at our Zoom networking happy hour starting in just a few minutes. Have a great weekend.